Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the January 19th, 2021 Select Board meeting. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'm going to read our public participation policy. The Hatfield Select Board welcomes everyone to its meetings and all other public meetings of the town of Hatfield. All regular and special meetings of the boards and committees of the town of Hatfield shall be open to the public and shall conform to the open meeting law. Executive sessions are closed to the public and will be held only as prescribed by the statutes of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It is important to recognize that the open meeting law affords the opportunity to listen to the proceedings, but not necessarily participate. During meetings of the Select Board, an attempt will be made to find a balance between hearing from members of the community and conducting the required business of the Hatfield Select Board. So our first order of business, as usual, is announcements. Did you have anything, Ed?
Thanks, spring.
Yeah. Felt like spring today. Brian?
I do not, thanks, Madam Chair.
I have just one thing. I just want to acknowledge that we were notified that Key Eno, who's been with the Select Board for 10 years, will be retiring at the end of March. And we just want to just let folks know that, and obviously we'll thank Key again, but thank you, Key, for everything, and we just want to acknowledge that she has let us know that, and we'll miss you, Key.
Yep, for sure.
Yes, for sure. I guess one other quick thing I would say, I had the opportunity to talk to the Hatfield Elementary first graders today about what it's like to be on the Select Board, and it was what you do, what your job is, what I enjoy about it, and it was just super fun, really super fun thing to do. And so I just want to thank the Hatfield Elementary first graders for being so welcoming and having such good questions for me. So then doesn't appear, no one's in person for public forum, which is probably because we're closed, correct?
Correct.
Is anyone present online for community forum? Doesn't look like anybody is.
Yep.
So we do have some minutes to approve.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of January 13th and the minutes of January 5th, both from the year 2021.
I'll second that motion.
A motion's been made and second. Is there any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Key, for doing those. And then we do want to just have a quick response. We had someone at Cindy Doty was in for public forum at our last meeting, I believe, discussing a situation that was taking place at a property behind her house. And there were some false statements made, and I thought it was really important to clear it up so that townspeople who maybe saw that meeting could get some additional information. I'm actually going to defer to our chief because it was the statements made about illegal blasting. So Chief, if you would like to address that, I'd be happy to give you a few minutes to do that.
Sure. I was on that meeting from 2 weeks ago. I heard the comments that were made that there was no permits pulled for the blasting at the property at 50 King Street. And in fact, I knew that they were pulled, but I went back and looked through all of our records. I pulled up the permit, which was from March 8th of 2017. It was signed by the then fire chief, Steve Gahn. It was also signed by Harlan Bean, who is the owner of Triple B Blasting from Whately. So there was, in fact, a permit pulled. The seismic report, which are required by law, was also completed on that same day. I have copies of their licenses, even the gentleman who actually did the blasting on site. So all of that information and everything was completely above board. There was permits, there was a fee paid. The entire thing was completely above board and totally legal. So I just want to make sure that the residents realize that, you know, the owner of the property didn't do something that they weren't supposed to do. And that also that we as the fire department also did what we were supposed to do. And we witnessed the blasting, we did the permitting and the whole 9 yards. And in fact, all three chief officers for the fire department have attended the blasting orientation that's put on through Department of Fire Services. So we are actually, the three of us are qualified to fully stand in on any blasting detail that takes place in the town of Hatfield. And not a lot of other fire departments can say that they have that because it's not something that happens very often. But we're fortunate, and all three of the chief officers do have that qualification for Hatfield.
Thanks for clarifying. I thought it was important, since that was said publicly, that we make sure that the public understood that that was, in fact, all done correctly. So thank you very much, Bob.
Thanks, Chief.
Our next agenda item is an update from our COVID coordinator, Carrie Flaherty.
She doesn't seem to be on right now.
Okay.
We can get back to that.
Stand by one. She's we're gonna switch.
Oh, okay.
The silence is deafening.
I know, so we could probably, oh no, here she comes. I was going to try to fill in the gap, but it looks like Carrie's here.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
So COVID, we are at 15 cases since last Monday. And our numbers seem to be the same for the last couple of weeks. I honestly have no true answer to why, but we've had some few really sick people actually, which is concerning for the fact that most of our cases, it's been minimal symptoms and stuff like that. But in the last few weeks, we've had a lot of actual sick people, and a handful of them had to go to the hospital and stuff like that. So I just can't stress that COVID is still a thing. And it's, yes, we've started vaccines recently. I definitely don't have an answer for when Hatfield, even if we're going to be able to do it as a clinic, like I talked about before, like that's our goal, is to have vaccines be able to be given, in town. And I'm doing the research for that, but we might have to combine with some other towns that already have it set up. I know I was speaking with Jerry from COA today, and she was notified that we might be connected with Amherst and the clinic that they have going on at the Bang Center in Amherst, which was where the fire department and the police department from town went to last week in the first phase of all of this. So we did discuss that location is not the greatest of locations to try to get to be able to park and stuff like that if we were to have to join with them for our seniors to be able to go there. So hopefully when it gets to that point, we might be looking at a different location when they know there's going to be a lot more people. I think they might have just picked that location specifically because the numbers were going to be lower for vaccines at this point. But other than that, there's really no other updates for the week. I meet with the school committee tonight, and we had met on Sunday night. So the JLMC has a recommendation to move forward with where numbers are at and whatnot. And the Board of Health did decide today that they have decided that they are not going to allow winter sports at this point because numbers are high. And though they are remote, we do have some cases within the school district at the high school. So though those cases are currently remote and not in the building, they do have interaction with the sports. So the Board of Health has decided that cases have consistently stayed high in town, and they just feel the safest thing is to not have sports at this point. So that's the decision that they made today.
Okay. I appreciate the update. I think you said it best, that COVID is still a thing, and it feels like we're getting closer to better days with the vaccine, but we still have to get through the next 2-3 months until the general public maybe is starting to be vaccinated, and so people still need to be adhering to the guidelines and whatnot. Carrie, I just wanted to mention, we received something in the mail that is anonymous. We don't normally respond to anonymous things, but this says that there's a rumor that the spread recently is due to our Polish club in town. And I wanted to just make sure that we put out there, because I don't want people talking about, our Polish club is closed. There has been nobody in that building.
Correct.
I think what this person is referring to is a Polish club in another town that had a problem. So I think they have some wrong information, and I guess I was just concerned that a business in town, there'd be rumors about it that just plain aren't true. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Yep, and that is absolutely correct. Our Polish club has been shut down since way back in March or whenever we had to close them. They have not reopened, and I've actually had many conversations with multiple members from there. As much as I would love for them to get to reopen, and as much as they would love to be able to reopen, they know that they can't, and they have not been doing anything they're not supposed to be. So
Right, so it is.
It definitely is a rumor, and it is not a true rumor. It's not the Polish club from our town. Yes, there has been issues in a different town that I won't name, but there have been cases from there, and I know that situation has been rectified also from that town.
Right.
So
I guess I just, in an effort to protect a business that, we.
no, absolutely,
That's a good point,
absolutely.
yeah.
And the only other thing that I do want to bring up, we've taken complaints lately about gatherings, and some of which that I've witnessed myself. And I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. People aren't supposed to be gathering. People need to be wearing their masks. I've seen children gathering without mask wearing at multiple places. I've seen people gathering, and I understand everybody wants to get back to somewhat of a new normal, but if people continue to complain about it and it gets caught, we are going to end up having to fine people, and I don't want to do that. So please just follow the guidelines that have been set in place for months now and not have large gatherings or even gatherings more than what we're supposed to be to keep our numbers down, since we do have high numbers in town right now and we've had them for weeks. And those numbers are not really due to one incident either. So.
Right. Okay,
But that's all I have for COVID this week.
thank you, Carrie. Appreciate it. Ed, did you have any questions
No,
for Carrie?
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you for the update.
Brian?
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to thank Carrie and Bob and Mike and the others that are involved in the
Scott.
Monday meetings. Yep, Scott Pomeroy for his assistance as well. And as just a follow-up to what Carrie said, and I say this pretty much at every meeting, wear your masks. I don't know how to make it any simpler than that. Wear a mask. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what we're encouraged to do. And it's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. And that's what, the CDC, DPH, Governor, Carrie, and everybody else. It's just very, very important. And that's all I'm going to say. So thank you. Just a reminder, everybody, to please continue to wear your mask.
It is the way to ultimately get us back
Yeah.
to normal as fast as possible. If we can just, I know people are getting weary of all of this, but if we can just make it past this next couple of months, maybe we can get kids back in school and people can, everything can start to return to normal, which is, I think, what all of us want.
Yep, agreed.
Very much so.
Okay, Carrie, again, a million thanks. Thank you, and pass our thanks along to Scott.
Sure. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good night.
So we have some appointments and resignations to deal with tonight. It looks as if do we have Cole Layton on?
Cole is here.
Hi, Cole.
I don't see the police chief. He was going to join us.
Is Chief DeKoschak on, or?
No, I don't see him anyway.
Okay.
I am here.
Oh, you
Oh,
are
you
there.
are.
Okay, don't see
Hi,
you.
Chief.
Oh, I don't know why you can't see me, but that's probably a good thing, right?
Not the worst thing that happened.
Welcome, Chief.
So we have a letter here from Chief DeKoschak asking that we appoint Cole Layton as a part-time police officer. So Chief, did you want to take a minute to introduce Cole to the town?
Sure. So Cole Layton comes to us. He lives in Northfield. And I can let him speak to most of this, but he's finishing up his associate's degree at GCC. He comes from a police family up in Northfield. So he has some history with that. He's young and he's green, but we are going to train him up, and I actually hope that he can be with us for a few years anyhow before he moves on to something bigger and better.
Great. Cole, we're delighted to have you here at the meeting tonight, and we're certainly delighted to have you interested in being on the Hatfield Police Department, so welcome. Is there anything you wanted to say so that maybe townspeople, know who you are and?
I'm Cole, I am still working on my associates at GCC, Greenfield Community College. I've gone to part-time police academy. I have all my training so far, firearms training in the academy. And I'm just looking, he said I do live in Northfield. It's about the same size as Hatfield, and I've heard good things about the chief and the police department. I'm just looking forward to training and starting my career.
Excellent. Well, you have a nice resume, and I'm just delighted to have you wanting to come and work here in Hatfield. It is a nice town and it is a nice department. So, did anyone else have a question for Cole?
I didn't have any
Oh,
questions.
thank you for joining the police department.
Yeah, thank you.
And we look
No
forward to
problem.
meeting you in person.
We do.
So I would entertain a motion to,
I'll make a motion that the Hatfield Select Board appoint Cole Layton as a part-time police officer.
I'll second that.
a motion made and second. Any further discussion?
No?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Welcome aboard, Cole.
Welcome, Cole.
Thank-
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
You're welcome. Thanks,
Thanks,
Mike.
Chief.
Thank you.
So we also have a resignation to accept, which is Elizabeth Denny resigning from the Historical Commission.
Yes.
So we would need to just vote to accept that.
I'll make a motion to accept with regret the resignation of Elizabeth Denny from the Historical Commission.
Second that?
A motion made and second. Any further discussion?
Does that mean now that there is an opening in
There is
town
a
for-
vacancy on the historical commission.
So this is a good time to let people know that if they're interested in serving on the very first committee I ever was on, way back, was the Historical
I had
Commission.
no idea you
Yes,
ever served on the
Way back
historical
with
commission.
Mary Lou Cutter.
I just thought I knew everything about you.
No, that goes way
Full of
back.
Surprises.
Full of surprises, yes. So, yeah, I did that for a number of years with Mary Lou, Kathy Grandonico, George Ashley, yeah. So it's a great commission and important. We just had some folks at one of our meetings recently from Historical Commission. So, so if you're interested, there is an opening. Did we take an actual vote?
No, we didn't.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And it looks like we are going to ask Chief Flaherty to rejoin the meeting.
There he is.
Bob.
I'm back.
So we have, our next agenda item is a discussion of staffing and firefighters grant.
Correct. So, I put in my operating budget for FY '22, and in there, I put in the budget that I really need is showing for the need for a full-time firefighter EMT alongside myself. In the course of a year, looking at the 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. time period, we have about 90 calls during that time period, and on average over the last 3 years, we're missing 27 of them. So we're missing almost a third of the calls during that 9-hour block just due to people working their full-time jobs, or they're on their way to their jobs, so they don't have the time to be able to do it. We're running at a kind of a bare minimum right now. We have, I did just appoint a new EMT last week, but he's not on board yet. We still need to get them trained. I have a couple of others that are still in their third ride time. So right now we're kind of running the ambulance with only about 3 people. It's essentially myself, Steve Gahn, and Dan Howard. And then when the 2 days a week that I have Max Gagnon, we're able to cover the calls. But we are really getting to the point that the town is going to have to consider putting another full-time staff with us. Everything that I do, or the fire department does, or the ambulance does, requires a minimum of 2. We're kind of a team sport. So we're just kind of to that point that I think the town's going to have to pony up a little bit, unfortunately, and and look towards that. With that being said, is that I've run the numbers, and the fact is that by covering those calls, or the calls that we've missed, equates to about $18,900 a year in revenue. So with the budget that I put in, the additional cost to run the staffing up for 3 additional days a week is right around $18,000. So coincidentally, if we're covering more calls during that time period, it's actually going to pay for itself in the long run anyway. So it's not necessarily the town having to come up with any more tax money, because we're not funded by taxation from the ambulance. It is just to make the agreement that we would be able to take additional revenue from the ambulance and put it back in to cover the cost of another employee. With that being said, is that they are there to be an EMT, but they are also there to get on the fire truck as well. NFPA says that you should have a minimum of 4 people on a fire truck when it goes out the door for a structure fire. You know, we've kind of settled on that 3 is adequate for a lot of the calls that we do, and we're having a harder time staffing the fire site as well. Everybody works a full-time job, and even a couple of the folks that we used to have during the day and during the week, you know, their other jobs have kind of precluded them from being able to go on fire calls. So we're kind of rolling out the door with 1 person, 2 people at most on a lot of days. So we're kind of there, you know, with small town Hatfield, but we're still very, very busy in the long run. Ambulance is up. We were down in 2020 about 32 calls on the ambulance side, but the fire side was up 23 calls. So, you know, still a net loss of 11 total calls, but we're still out there. The severity of ambulance calls are much more severe, and we're just kind of in that boat. We're staffing it at the medic level, or we're not staffing it at all, unfortunately. So I just wanted to bring that to the forefront, that as we move into the budget season, it is there. When it comes time to be, is, you know, if the money's not there, or we can't do something, I could still like to try to bring up the staffing at least to 20 hours a week, if at a bare minimum, and then I can spread it out a little bit easier, just to try to do better for the citizens. We're missing calls just because we don't have staff right now. So.
And when a call is missed, that means that a resident is waiting for another town or another ambulance service to send someone, and it's quite a lengthy process to make that happen, and in an emergency, that's a difficult thing. So in listening to you talk, for what comes to mind for me, first and foremost, is our response times getting to residents who are calling the ambulance for, because they're sick or injured or whatever. So, you know, that's certainly of concern, and this is nothing new, Bob. We've been having these conversations since I was on the board last time, which was a really long time ago. So it seems to be just an ongoing issue. That's just what I wanted to.
The good side is that we are bringing in more revenue. It's continuously gone up over the last 3 years, and a good chunk of that has to do with the fact that we are staffing and we're running at the paramedic level. We are able to bill at a higher rate for the higher level of care, which then in turn means more revenue coming back into the ambulance. So it's there. It's just a matter of getting the approval, essentially, to kind of move forward to head in that direction. And if it can't happen all at once, to go to a 5-day-a-week, you know, maybe we can work at it and slowly bring it up over the next 2 years. Maybe go to 3 days, go to 4 days, or go from 3 to 5. But it's kind of there. You know, we require 2 people. I've put things in place right now that are allowed under an emergency waiver, that I have firefighters actually transporting with us on the ambulance, but that's not going to stay forever. That is only currently during the emergency declaration. And I've already used that about 5 times, which is a benefit, but that's not a long-term solution.
And not the most ideal way, given the circumstances of what calls could be as well.
Correct.
So this agenda item actually said staffing/firefighters grant. Is there?
So the first part was the staffing. I wanted to kind of get out early and get you aware that we are having trouble in general with the staffing. The grant was actually a different, not having to do with staffing.
Okay, so let's finish up with this topic. Did you,
Yeah, I just want to say, I want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly, that's all. I think if we go back a few years, there's been pieces of puzzles put together. First, it was bring the ambulance up to paramedic level, get a new ambulance, get equipment, help staff the ambulance. So I think we're probably ready for what you're saying, but I'm hoping that on the financial side, you could give us something in writing of what you were saying as far as the numbers, just to help. I think maybe we're ready for the final step of doing what you're saying we should do, because now that we can answer the calls, now that we got the new ambulance, now that we got the equipment, maybe it's our turn to step in that direction. So I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I just like to see something on the paper of what you're saying, so I just get a better understanding, that's all.
Yes. And part of that is in the actual budget packet that I put in between the level service or level funded and then the other one. Some of that information is actually part of that packet as well. And then I have some other data that shows exactly the number of calls that we're missing with the dollar amount based on the average revenue per ambulance call and so forth. So I have all that information as we move forward through the budget season with both you and the finance committee.
okay, so you're just letting us know what your request is going to be.
A little bit, getting out ahead of it and letting you realize that, we are having trouble. COVID obviously dropped our numbers down on the ambulance side, which is going to hurt our revenue for the FY21 year as a whole, unless it picks up in the next 5.5 months. But it's still, we need the assistance, we need people, and this is kind of the next step, is to guarantee that 5-day-a-week, 8-hour days that we're going to be getting a Hatfield ambulance out the door at the paramedic level and giving the highest level of care, which then in turn, it puts a little less stress on the other call members, that they're more inclined to, hey, I can do the evening calls, I can do the overnight calls, because I'm not also running multiple calls during the course of a day as well.
Okay, so the evening and weekend calls, you tend to have better response.
Tend to, yes. A little bit on the overnight for the last couple months. One of our fairly regular EMTs, he has started picking up other shifts of another ambulance service. So he ends up working a lot of midnight to 6 a.m. Fortunately, we haven't had a lot of ambulance calls on the overnights. They are typically day call and into the early to mid evening, at least for the last 6 months.
Okay, Brian, did you?
I'll just thank Bob for bringing it to the forefront now, and I'll piggyback on what Ed said. Is I think once we have the documentation in front of us, going forward, we'll be able to make some decisions. But I do appreciate it, Bob, letting us know and having the conversation so that the townspeople can understand, where we stand right now.
Right.
So thank you. Other than that, I don't really have anything at this point regarding that.
It's hard to wait for an ambulance. I've had to do it, and it's really hard. Okay, so then now, did you want to talk about this grant?
Sure. So the grant side of things is looking for the Board of Selectmen to agree. I would like to put in for an Assistance to Firefighters grant. It has to do with the communications equipment that also went in as a capital item. For the last 2 years, we weren't able to get it funded. Since the first time that the communications equipment went in under capital, some other things have changed in the area. The police department currently, they're now running off of the 800 megahertz frequency. So because we're running on 2 different systems, we now have no direct communication with Hatfield PD going to a medical call or a fire call or anything else. So we do rely a little bit too much or more on our dispatch, and Chief DeKoschak's on. Sometimes things don't get relayed 100% between once it goes through 2 or 3 people at dispatch. Also being said is that we have mutual aid agreements with our partners to the north in Franklin County. They are switching over on the fire side to the 800 megahertz frequency starting in March. And they will only run a link for the next 6 to 8 months. So after that, we will no longer be able to talk to any of our fire partners to the north. There is also a plan in Hampshire County that Hampshire County fire departments within the next 3 are also going to be switching to the 800 megahertz frequency from the VHF, or very high frequency bandwidth.
Within the next
that-
3 what?
Pardon?
You said within the next 3, the next 3 months?
Within the next 3 years,
3 years, okay.
Hampshire County is slated to change over. In general, they want all public safety to be on the 800 megahertz bandwidth.
Okay, so I mean, obviously, we need to have the most up-to-date radios, and you guys need to be able to communicate. So I saw, I'm on the capital plan, I saw these items on the capital plan for approval for this year. I do have one question about what you said. So if Franklin County goes to 800 and Hatfield goes to 800 and Hampshire County hasn't yet, does that mean you can't communicate with them?
Correct. We will only be able to communicate for approximately 6 months. Franklin County is going to still operate with
That,
the
but-
calling link.
I understand Franklin County's switching, and you want to switch, but Hampshire County's not switching for 3 years?
Potentially, yes. It's
So
all a
then you
matter
would
of
have
funding at
the-
state level.
So you would have the communication problem with Hampshire County at that point?
Once we switch, is
Once
what
we
Diana's
switch,
asking.
Yeah.
Once Hampshire County were to switch, the entire county would be switching.
No, I know, but in the meantime, Hatfield would have trouble communicating with Hampshire County.
For those who have not switched yet.
Currently, we
Okay.
would still be able to communicate with all of Hampshire County fire.
Fire, but not police.
Correct.
There's some misunderstanding there. What's being asked, Bobby, is if you were to switch today to all 800, would you still be able to communicate with Hampshire County?
Yes.
If we were to switch, no, and that is part of where the communications, what we're actually requesting is they're actually a multi-band radio. So we would be able to talk to anybody that's on VHF, UHF, and the 800 megahertz frequencies, or bandwidth, excuse me. So these would cover us across the board, including when we're going mutual aid, when we're on the state mobilization plan, which we are. So it kind of covers a broader scope, and it's putting us a little bit ahead of the curve within the next 2 years. With that being said, this is not just a matter of trying to get ahead of the curve. It is also replacing equipment that is 18 years old, that has a typical life expectancy of 12 to 15. The other half of our radios that are about the 12, 13, 14 years, because they vary, talking to our radio vendors, they're not actually rated as fire radios. They're not intrinsically safe. They're not supposed to be used in a hazardous environment. They are, for what the vendor called this, essentially these are custodial staff radios to be used for that purpose.
So like not heat rated or something like that? Is that what you're saying to me?
They're not heat rated. If you key the mic and there's a hazardous atmosphere, it could actually make the situation worse. They are not waterproof, which is obviously a big part of what we use. So they're not really designed for what we're doing. They were purchased many years ago within a smaller amount of dollars that we had, but they're just not quite there.
So you mean
that's
like if there was like fumes or gases or something? Is that what you mean when you say?
Correct.
Okay.
They could produce an electrical spark
Yeah,
to actually
okay.
ignite a fire if the right mixture is there. I can't give you an exact example because it's a matter of whatever the product
I
happens to be.
understand. Okay.
So,
I
I'm sorry.
I was just sorry. What I was trying to get at was, and I guess you answered this, if you can communicate across all bands, like I didn't want to be able to communicate with Franklin County and not Hampshire County, because I would assume we rely on Hampshire County as much, if not more, than Franklin County in terms of mutual aid. So,
Our primary mutual aid is actually Whately Fire. So they, on a report of a structure fire, they are the first town that comes in to
Okay.
us.
but obviously Northampton is the community with the ladders and, right, so. All right, but the radios that you're suggesting buying would be able to communicate with everybody right away. no matter what frequency they were using, okay.
No matter where we are in the entire state, we would be able to do it. They have 121 channels that you'd be able to program into them. So we would be able to work across all bandwidths, talk to all organizations that we would need to, and it's coming online with the new systems that are coming out. Some are already here, some are, in the works, and here probably within the next 2 to 3.
Yes.
The point of tonight's meeting was basically I would like to put in for the Assistance to Firefighters grant in the hopes that we could get awarded the money to cover said project and not necessarily have it be fully relying on capital. With that being said, it is a 5% match from the town of Hatfield to cover that difference. With that, the total grant application for AFG would be $282,904.58, which would put the town share at $14,145.23.
Well, that sounds like a
That's a no-brainer.
fiscally responsible
no-brainer.
idea.
That's not a bad deal at all, is it?
Yeah, no, I mean, you weren't expecting any resistance from us, were you, Bob?
I was not, but I just wanted to make sure because it's a fairly time consuming for the grant. It's about a 76-page document and a lot of work. I just want to make sure that the town would be willing to accept the grant. Once it's awarded, the town only has 30 days to accept it, accept the award, and they're planning on doing the award period between March and April.
Yeah, well, we'll pass the hat if we need to come up with,
Yeah.
with that.
You-
That sounds
you
like
first.
yeah, that
So,
sounds like a great deal, actually.
I think you
mean,
got to give that a shot.
absolutely. Yep.
And particularly because there's another large capital expense coming up for the fire department, which is the updated SCBA
Correct.
air packs. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's, any department that could go after that kind of grant money would be encouraged. And Chief DeKoschak is here. So these are the same radios, Mike, that you would be wanting to get, and they would all be compatible and work together.
Yeah, yes, to the latter part of your question. They would be compatible, but they wouldn't be the radios we have now. The radios we have now, we got through a grant. The entire county got them. They're extremely expensive. They're tri-band radios, which we don't need or even use the full capability of these radios. I can't even imagine a time where we would as police officers. To that end, those radios are about $6,700 a piece, and our issue is we don't have enough of them. I can only have 4 people out that can communicate with one another at any given one point in time, which obviously is problematic for any type of a large event. The radios that we'd be looking to get and be part of, Bobby can give you an exact figure, but they're considerably less, at probably half of what ours cost.
Okay, but this is all, you guys are working together on this radio thing is what I'm trying to understand here.
The way I understood it too.
Well, it sounds like the communication.
The capital is joint. The grant would not be allowed to be put in for both because it is
Okay.
specific for the fire service.
Right.
But the
Gotcha.
capital is a joint effort.
But the amount for the radios for the police department, if I recall, is less.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
request, the capital request, because it's less radios.
61 and change, I believe. 61,000 and change for the police radios.
Mike,
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
so,
I thought it was answered. Yeah, it's considerably less, simply because we're going with a much cheaper radio. I don't know how it worked out in the initial thing. It was almost like, there was one person selling radios and there was one radio you could buy. The state now is accepting many different manufacturers of these radios. So instead of the Motorola's, we can do Kenwood or something else and not use it. It's they're tri-band radios. We don't need a tri-band radio. So the ones we have now are tri-band.
I understand that, yep.
Yeah, the ones we would be asking for are half the price, and it would allow us to, just be able to have our officers, many of our officers have radios.
So if the tri-bands are like $6,700 a piece, you say these are about half the cost. How on earth are we
Yeah.
getting to $61,000? Because, I mean, that's a lot of radios.
Well, when you're talking, the radio itself costs that. Then you have chargers, then you have external mics, you have an extra battery for each radio, et cetera, et cetera. Just replacing a battery on our radios can set you back $150 for a battery. So those are all in prices with all those extra amenities that are on there that are pretty much needed. The radio itself might cost you $3,000 or $3,500, but when you tack on all of the other things that come with it, it starts to add up.
Okay, so just from a capital planning perspective, will you be
Yeah.
able to give us some kind of breakdown of that? Like how you get to that figure?
Yeah,
I guess?
for one radio, there's probably 10 or 11 different items listed on a piece of paper that go with that radio. We can certainly, I thought we gave a copy of that. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I can get that to you.
Okay. Okay, I just want to make sure too that whatever we're doing makes us completely compatible and compatible with within the departments and obviously with our neighbors that we occasionally rely on and who occasionally rely on us.
If it was submitted to me, Chief, then I have it, and I can I thought I had forwarded everything to the capital planning. But
Okay.
I can check that.
Okay.
Yeah, the 800 system it's obviously, it's a digital system, so it's how everything is going. It's going digital, like your cell phones, like everything else. The analog systems are a thing of the past. They don't want to it would cost them millions of dollars to repair them. And so that's why they're not putting the money into the analog system. So eventually the radios that are being used now, not by us, but by the fire department, will go the way of the dinosaur, unfortunately. And what happens, the small towns end up really taking a hit from these things. There's not much we can do about it, I guess.
Well, but there is, Bob has found this opportunity that is
Yeah.
definitely worth pursuing. So I guess I would just thank Chief Flaherty for, finding this and being willing. I know grant applications can be a nightmare. I do them often. So I'm, grateful and just let us know if there's anything you need from us to get that together.
Good.
Anything else, Ed?
No, I
for
think
Chief?
I understand the radio, because at UMass, we had issues with the walkie-talkies and the costs, and ended up, a lot of people it was cheaper to get them phones.
Oh, interesting, yeah. Well, in this case, it's probably not, phones are not going to work,
When you
but,
talk, it won't work with police or
no,
fire,
it's not
but-
going to work. But again, you guys have to communicate. So, Brian, anything?
Nothing that you and Ed didn't already ask, like usual, but no, I just want to thank Bob, Chief Flaherty, for inquiring about the grant.
Yeah.
And let's get those 77 pages done, or 76 pages that you said it was. We'll get you some coffee. And kidding aside, good luck with everything. And as Diana mentioned, if there's something you need from, I don't know what it would be, but some sort of numbers or something, whether it's through the board or through Marlene or Sharon's office, whatever, to fill that application out, certainly let us know. We'd be more than happy to assist.
Yep. I mean, that,
Put in for this grant before, a few years ago. We did miss it by one category. It was basically the cost benefit analysis that we missed on, which is pretty good when you're talking thousands of applicants across the United States.
Yeah.
And there's a limited pool of money. So we were pretty close. I think if there was a little bit more money available, we would have made it through. But we got through the computer grading system, and it was actually made it into the peer review, and it was just that final cutoff that we missed out on. So I'm hoping now, and communications, I was told I sat in a webinar last week, communications are considered one of the highest priorities for this grant. So we're kind of falling right into everything that they're looking for.
That's great.
That's
Thank you.
great.
Is the grant, is the acceptance of the grant or the awarding of the grant, should we get awarded the grant, is it going to be for that almost $300,000, or could it be anywhere from, you know, down below all the way up to 300,000? You know what I mean? Could it be 100,000? Could it be 50,000? Or is it all of it or nothing? Do you know?
So they can cut it down if they feel that you have misrepresented, but usually that comes down to is that, you know, for instance, in this case, radios, you're supposed to be one radio per seated riding position in all of your apparatus.
Okay.
So if, in our case, we have 25 riding positions, we're going for 25 radios.
Got it.
If you were to have put in for 30 and your numbers don't match, because you have to put in your apparatus and the number of seated positions,
Sure.
then they will cut your money down based off of the data that you put into the system, but you did it wrong. In our case, we are just doing exactly the riding positions. These are the radios. So as long as everything else goes well, it shouldn't come in any less than that.
That's great. Okay. Thank you.
Very good. I appreciate you pursuing that.
Try
Nice
to save
work.
some money.
Yes, thank you, Bob.
And I think it's really important for townspeople to hear about the radios and the, you know, really what a priority it is, so. Okay, very good. Bob, Chief, you're all set. Chief
Oh,
Mike,
well,
Chief Bob,
We're
everybody's
still the
good?
next
Oh,
topic 5.
geez, okay, Bob.
Not done yet.
No, sorry. So we have, our next agenda item is to just,
Time to get me in one night.
Yeah, that's right.
is to discuss the emergency management charter,
Correct.
which we have a copy of here, and a listing of who is on the emergency planning committee. So is there something that we need to update with the charter?
So there is. So part of the charter had in there about the fact that the emergency management director was actually chosen by the emergency management planning committee.
Mm-hmm.
So that in effect, because of what the town and you folks chose to do with the fire chief's position last year, that has now been rolled into the fire chief's job. So in fact, we want to make sure that the charter matches what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit of just a cleanup to make sure that we're all on the same page. And then at our last EMPC meeting that we did have, excuse me, Chief DeKosiak and myself and Deputy Chief Gunn over the last couple of years had looked at the role of the Emergency Management Planning Committee. And in fact, it had kind of grown into more of from a planning committee to what we call an ESF, so emergency support functions. And we were adding extra roles that aren't part of the actual planning for an emergency, but they would be roles that you would bring in if an emergency would happen. For instance, you know, the media isn't going to make a decision about an emergency procedure or how we are going to handle an emergency in town, but that was a position that had been put onto the committee. That's not something that they need to be. That would be in the event of an emergency, you would have specifically a PIO to talk to the media. So it kind of outgrew what it was intended for. And there was also a section in the old charter. It kind of led to that the emergency planning committee was given more authority as an appointed committee. Essentially, it was saying they could tell Chief DeKosiak and myself how to mitigate an emergency within the town. And that's not how the law is written. It's very clear under Mass General Law. Chief DeKosiak has his laws that gives him his power of authority, just like I have mine, and how we handle things on each side of the house. So that was something that we needed to take out. So Chief DeKosiak and I talked about it last week. So a lot of this was just kind of cleaning up and putting on the number of people, the 9 voting members that would really come up and work on hazard mitigation, emergency preparedness the COOP plan. What else am I missing? MVP that we were just working on over the last couple of months. Those are the core voting members that should be working on those plans and then voting on that plan specific to the town of Hatfield that then goes in the 3-ring binder, that goes in the town administrator's office, the emergency management cabinet, and everybody has access to it as we put it onto also the state system. So that's kind of where the charter change was. It was just kind of paring down what is required by law, and then the change to the committee does not choose the emergency management director.
So I was on the emergency planning committee years ago, and if I recall, it was huge. There was tons and tons of people on it. And so now you're saying it's been pared down to these 9 people, which would also be people that would likely actually kind of be activated in some way, shape, or form, depending on the emergency, right? So we have like DPW, law enforcement, that sort of thing, right? So that's what I'm understanding. And so my other question in looking at this, it has local elected official, PIO, which is less Ed. I thought when we had that meeting over at the fire station about, what was that we were talking, it was emergency planning. It was a vulnerability thing.
Right.
I thought that was the chair of the board.
So in this case, the PIO would, in this instance, is specific to the planning committee, not for an emergency. And this, I believe this is where there's that crossover for when an emergency actually happens. Right. Yes, it would be the chairperson that's going to speak. But as far as the planning committee, it would be the figurehead that needs to come forward if you needed to talk about something with the planning. And this is where, and Chief DeKoschak can correct me, the planning committee is specific to coming up and formulating the plans when an emergency happens, not to be activated the time of the emergency specifically. This is a pre-planning committee, not on the event of an actual emergency or the minute the emergency happens.
But of course, it seems like a lot of these people would serve in both capacities, ultimately, right?
Some of them, yes.
And I guess my other one thing that I noticed was that there's nobody representing the school department. Wouldn't it make sense to have somebody that represents the school department on the EPC? So
with that, it's the 9 voting members are the people that are specific that get a say in how we create a plan for an emergency event.
I understand that, but you don't think that the school department would be
required by law?
Okay.
Other members that are still there are still participants, but they are not part of the vote.
Okay. So school people are involved in the updating of these plans. Bob.
So if I could chime in real quick, it would actually be nice to see, 40 or 50 people on the committee itself when we're talking about, because essentially that the vision here is to have that planning committee looking at our vulnerabilities and looking at areas of town or things that could become an issue. When it comes to the 9 voting members, those are the people, that are doing some type of actionable thing during an emergency. So there's just that little bit of, there's that separation there. For instance, we'll keep on the PIO, the public information officer, just like you see in Springfield with the news conferences every Monday with their COVID, the mayor is there. And essentially that would be the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. That they're going to be the public information officer. They're going to be the ones delivering the message unless they delegate it to somebody else, not the chairman of the committee or just anybody. Okay. That's the delineation that we're looking for.
So there are other people that take part in the actual planning, and that I would assume the school department, maybe somebody like somebody from the Council on Aging or Jerry.
Yes.
Of
In other
course,
words, so that
because-
we're covering all the bases, like you were saying, Michael, making sure that we're looking at all the vulnerabilities, who, depending on the different kinds of emergencies. I know when I was on, I mean, you talk about all different kinds of emergencies and the
Yeah, I
type
mean,
of
our
response.
seniors are a vulnerable population, especially in an emergency. So, Jerry, the school department, just even regular citizens, I would love to see that type of a committee grow and have people interested in it. Because we can't foresee everything that's going on in an emergency, and we're going to miss things even during these planning phases of things that perhaps we're not thinking about, such as just the, even the farmers, what could impact
I was just gonna mention that, yeah, because that was something we talked about on the MVP meetings. Okay, I'm just wanting to understand this and ask questions so that anybody watching would understand as well. So this is what you're proposing as the updated charter?
That is correct. It was actually discussed at the EMPC meeting that we had. And those were the 9 positions that are required to be filled or need to be filled or serve a role. Again, the committee itself would be 15 or 16 members, which is what it currently is.
Okay,
It's just when it comes to actually voting on a specific emergency
Okay.
plan, those are the core members because they have a specific role
In
in
their-
that emergency.
In their department, basically, within
Correct.
that.
right, and so
That's
just for
what it
this,
is,
maybe to make, so that this makes sense to people watching. So can I identify who the 9 people are, the 9 voting members are? So that people
Absolutely.
understand, so
Yeah.
from an administration standpoint, Marlene Mashansky is a voting member. On behalf of local officials, it would be Ed Jaworski. Local elected officials, Ed fills that role. For the fire department, obviously, it's Chief Flaherty, and then the alternate would be Deputy Chief Gahn. Law enforcement, it would be Chief DeKoschak with an alternate of Sergeant Phillips. The DPW would be Garrett Berry with an alternate of Tony Listowski. For the public health, it would be Board of Health Chair Bob Osley. Hospital healthcare representative is Elizabeth Kugler. Animal control would be Scott Pomeroy, and transportation would be John Pease. Transportation meaning what?
If we had to, mass exodus or get somebody evacuate, he has the connections to be able to
Correct, okay.
get a bus and move a large number of people. So that is something that could realistically happen due to,
Sure.
downtown, the flood zone and everything else. We would need to move people, and he
Okay.
has a very quick, easy contact
Okay,
to move a lot of people in a very short amount of time.
okay, great. So just so that people understand those 9 people who we're talking about.
Hey, may I?
Yep,
And it's those 9 people because they're currently within those 9 positions.
right.
It's really the
Yes,
position.
exactly, it's the
It's
position.
really the position, and then whoever happens to be filling those positions at the time.
Yes. Okay.
Correct.
May I?
Yes,
Okay, now, I do want to thank both chiefs for all the work on this, because this has been ongoing the last few years, trying to make it better. Because originally, the charter responsibilities of what they were and what they are today have changed a lot. So I do want to thank both chiefs for all the time, and also Chief Gahn previously put a lot of work in this too. So I just want to point that out to the townspeople, that this has been a lot of discussions over the last few years on how to simplify it, make it better, and make it work. So hats off to the chiefs.
absolutely.
Diana, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So these 9 people and alternates, would they continue to be appointed? I assume so, because they're voting members, but what about all the other people that are currently on the committee? Are we going to keep reappointing them, or we're not going to be appointing them because they're not voting members? I'm just trying to pare down the annual appointments if possible.
Sounds
Is
like
there
the
any
previous
reason to
committee should
appoint
be
them if they're not
dissolved.
voting?
So you're saying they're not voting members, Bob, so do they need to be actual sworn members of the committee? I mean, if they are, then they have voting privileges, right?
I don't believe they need to be sworn in, but as Chief DeKoschak said, if 25, 30, 40 people want to come to our meeting, we would certainly, obviously, once COVID's over, we'll welcome them into the meeting and take all of their input. But it's only the 9 that are actually going to finalize a particular emergency procedure as we look at all the different
Okay.
plans.
And so
So
there's
they're
only
more than
9 that
welcome,
need to
but
take
I'm
an
sure they-
oath. There's only 9 that need to take an oath and be sworn in, and the rest of them would be just,
Volunteers, basically.
yeah, basically
Right.
just meeting attendees,
Yep.
you know?
So could you take a vote on that so that when I present the annual appointments, I can take off those people? Since you're accepting the new charter and only the voting members will be appointed and everyone else will be volunteers.
Is that going to work for you, Mike and Bob, that it's done that way?
Yeah, I mean, so long as that works for Lydia and works for you guys, it works for us. And again, I want to reiterate to the townspeople is that it's the more, the merrier when it comes to planning for an emergency. When it comes to this charter, it's just, it has to do with how an emergency is dealt with. But when it comes to planning for any future potential emergencies or disasters or anything else, the more input, the better. We could certainly use more input.
So then we should, okay, which is great, I agree. And we should make sure we're doing a good job of getting information about those meetings out to the public so that people who want to even just listen to it or have input should do that. But we now need to change the way that the committee is constructed.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, I guess the only question I have, and maybe the chiefs have that answer, or Marlene or Lydia. You're sitting right here, so I always like to say Marlene might have the answer. But we still want we want people to commit to it, right? So I know we want as many people as we can get when you talk about having 20, 30, 40 people on this, if we want to call it a subcommittee or volunteer committee or whatever we want to call it. But we want them to actually be on the committee. In other words, if you had, let's just say you had monthly meetings, we don't want 30 different people coming in every month, right? I mean, so I think that's maybe Lydia's question.
Yeah,
Is
like we
there?
don't want no one from the Council on Aging ever
Yeah,
going.
well, that's what I
which
mean.
I know
So-
would never happen, but
Right, so I mean, we want as many volunteers as possible, but I think we're sort of looking for a commitment from those volunteers as well. So
it
maybe we
sounds-
do need an appointment, you know, maybe
It
we.
sounds like then you pretty much would still have the same committee that exists right now.
Yeah, I think one of them we should really call the Emergency Management Committee, that's these 9 people. And then
Okay.
maybe we have the Emergency Management Planning Committee, which is made up of all the
or
volunteers.
an ad hoc
or-
kind of
or
thing or
whatever.
something, whatever.
But I think the commitment
Yeah.
from the volunteers, or we should be looking for a commitment from the volunteers.
Right, in other words, you're always going to want to make sure that you have input from certain people.
Right.
From the school, from Council on Aging.
Exactly,
yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
But even, I think we also are even thinking, you know, townspeople who might have a
Farmers,
background
you know,
in whatever.
And
That's part of what makes up the other 6 or 7 members are the schools, Council on Aging,
Right.
Right. I was
a
gonna say.
representative from farming. And there's a couple more. So those people are still part of it. They're still going to get the same emails when we're posting a meeting. So none of that portion has changed. And another reason why we had looked at this is for the last 2 years, we've had a problem getting to a quorum because the committee had grown to 15 or 16 people. And now you needed 9 people to get to a quorum. And we went, I believe it was 4 consecutive meetings that we never hit a quorum, which means we couldn't vote on anything. We sat around, we just kind of talked, but there was no decisions because we weren't in a legal meeting. So by taking down the number of voting members, it makes it easier to hit the quorum, so that way things can still progress, but we still have that input from the same 15 or 16 members.
Okay.
Nothing's going to change on that side of it.
Okay. That sort of,
You want
Puts
to
things in
just,
perspective.
but they can all still be on the Emergency Management Planning Committee, but just differentiate between voting members and non-voting members.
correct.
I think that makes sense,
That- yes.
Lydia.
Yes.
So we're still, you still want to appoint them.
Well, I think we
Everybody.
should, I think there's more of a commitment from people if in fact they're appointed to a committee.
Right.
So I do think we should still appoint those that are interested, because that means they've come forward, submitted a letter of interest, and allows us to vote on it.
So you can appoint someone to a committee but limit their ability to vote on the matters? That seems odd.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know.
That doesn't seem, I don't know. I mean, maybe we just can't, maybe we got to think about this a little bit, how this is structured. You know,
Well, I'm not going to be submitting you lists or anything till next month, so.
Well, I think we could probably do the charter part of this if
I'm fine
we're
with
so
doing,
inclined.
I'm
and then-
fine with doing that.
And maybe just come up with what makes the most sense for participation in helping to plan for emergencies in the best way of going about it. Maybe it is, we kind of keep it as is, but I mean, you can appoint people to a committee. It doesn't mean they have to vote on something.
Well,
Yeah,
but
I mean-
it brings up the quorum question that Bob is,
No, I'm talking about if we, other than the 9 people identified as being the 9 voting members, we could appoint other people
People,
to
yeah.
be on the committee or a
Right.
committee or whatever we want to call it, ad hoc committee,
Diana raises a
you know,
good
something
question.
like
though,
that.
about-
And, but doesn't mean they need to vote.
well,
If you have it called the planning committee. I mean, you know, you call it
yeah, I mean,
something
maybe
else.
there
There-
just has to be an EPC ad hoc or something like that.
yeah.
And-
But I just think we ought to
Rename
make
it.
sure we do
well-
our homework and make
So,
sure
yeah,
that.
so
Yeah.
let's revisit that at the
Visit.
next meeting, how we can structure that in a way that
Makes sense for
makes
everybody.
people feel like recognizes them as part of the committee and a
Yes.
necessary part of the discussion, but doesn't give them voting rights. I don't know how you structure that. So let's think about that and look into
We
it.
need to look at that.
Now, the question is, can you reduce, if you have 16 members, can you reduce it to say that 6 have to be present to vote? I mean,
Can you reduce the quorum? I don't think so.
can the quorum be reduced?
I don't think so,
No?
no.
Because that's been the problem with the meetings, is there hasn't been enough of people there to pass anything.
Yeah, but you can't do that. I mean, you can't, there's a reason you have a quorum.
Right.
I couldn't just show up and say, let's reduce the quorum, and I'm just going to sit here and make all the decisions.
So the only way you can reduce it is having voting members and non-voting members, if that's the way
Right.
you want to go, right?
Yeah, but we've got to figure out how you really have a non-voting member. What does that really mean?
You tell them you're on the committee, but you're a non-voting member. I mean, you make it clear right up front. I don't think there's a legality issue with that, quite frankly.
Unless you have the
An advisory member.
Yeah, call them whatever you
unless
want.
you have the EPC with these 9 members, and then you have an advisory committee that's separate,
Right.
and you meet together.
Yeah.
So-
Which I think is what the chiefs want,
Right.
is still want the
So
input
let's
from
just-
various
Yeah,
groups.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Let's just chew on it for a couple of weeks. There's no
Yeah.
urgency, right, Bob?
No,
Okay.
it was just trying to get one more thing kind of off the plate that's been hanging out there. We were able to meet in the fall, so.
This or-
Yeah,
it was
the
brought up
charter
at
is
the
fine,
committee.
right?
This is kind of what the EPC ultimately decided, that we needed to restructure a little bit, because again, we were having trouble getting quorums and everything else, so we weren't doing what we were supposed to be.
So can we approve this, and then we'll just figure out that other piece for the next meeting?
I think that's fair.
Okay.
All right, I'll make a motion that we approve the charter as presented by the Emergency Management Director.
I'll second that.
Motion's made and second. Any further discussion?
No,
All
ma'am.
those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks for that, bringing that to our attention.
Yep.
We'll wrap it up in a couple weeks.
Thanks, Bob, thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is an update from our DPW director. Is Phil on there?
I am.
Hi, Phil.
Hi,
Can
Phil.
we see you, Phil? Do you have a
I can
camera?
see you.
Do you have a camera?
Yes, I can hear you and see you, yes.
I know, but can you turn your camera on so we can see you?
I don't try, I don't think so. No. I've been trying to turn it on, it didn't go on, so.
Okay.
So anyways, you can hear me, correct?
Yes, we can hear you, so that's fine. We can move forward that way,
I
so,
have like 5 or 6 things I just want to go over briefly. So the first thing is, this weekend we had a water main break on Elm Court. It was a pretty substantial break that drained the tanks to down 100,000 gallons of water. So the wells kicked on. But saying that, we've discovered on Elm Court, there's a piece of transite pipe that runs between 2 ductile iron pipes. So at one end of Elm Court is ductile iron, then it goes to a 4-inch transite line that goes back to the ductile iron. So I'm going to update my capital plan to replace that transite pipe with ductile iron. The parts are probably 30 to 40,000, so it's probably like a $50,000 item, but I think it's something that's has to be done eventually, so I will put it on the capital plan. I'll contact them tomorrow morning.
okay. Yeah, because we have a capital planning meeting, I think,
Tomorrow night.
tomorrow night.
Yeah, it's something that just came up, you don't know till you get into it, and that's exactly what was exposed, and I think we've had 4 or 5 breaks down there within, the last 5 years, so it's time to take a good hard look at it. And
Okay,
okay, the other thing is the Chestnut Street water main. The project's on hold until, after the winter weather. They did set the bridge. The utility bridge is set, and they laid the insulated pipe on top of it to get it off the road because of snow plowing. That was one thing we requested, that the pipe couldn't stay on the side of the road, so they moved it and they put it on the bridge for now. So there'll be 2 connections on each end of the bridge, when the construction season breaks. And a couple of services up the road a little bit, so that should wrap that project up finally.
and that iron bridge will stay there?
Yes, the iron bridge is staying there.
Okay. And then the actual Chestnut Street Bridge, that doesn't get widened at all in this project?
No. They put the utility bridge here just to hold the suspended water main.
Okay. Okay. Okay,
Okay, and then we have the Mass Works project. So the water pipe for that project has been delivered. It's at the well on Route 5 in the field. And that kicked off the financial part that needed to be kicked off. So with that being said, I know there's been some discussion about the easements, and there's been some back and forth from the resident, the owners. But today we received from the Division of Fishery and Wildlife the review and a notice of intent to proceed. It's been completed, and they determined that there's no advisory effect in that area, in that resource area. And that was all done with the current plan that's in place. So they accepted the plan as presented. So to change the easements again, I think is not in our best interest.
Yeah, I
Plus,
mean,
it's gonna be $40,000 to $50,000 cost added to go across the street. or
well,
up the
we
road a
already
little
went,
bit.
yeah, and we already went to town meeting, and the owners were there, and no issues were raised, and the town accepted the easement. So are we not good there?
I mean, that's my recommendation, to proceed as planned, as the plan is drawn, with the easements in place that were accepted at town meeting.
Okay,
Yeah, and I, just on top of that, I would agree we need to move forward with what's been approved already. But we're also going to do our best to accommodate those easements as far as
Right, of
beautification and making sure that nothing sticks out like a sore thumb.
Minimally-
Yeah, minimally invasive. I mean, our plan isn't to just put up or have any sort of a structure or anything in anybody's way. We're going to work with the owners, as we should, and we'll do our due diligence to make sure this is the best job we can do and the least obstructive job we can do as well.
Of course.
So,
Yeah, I know there's been some questions about, one of the property owners that the parking lot has just been paved and about an odor control. Well, they're both in there. I mean, whatever they disturb, they're going to repair
Yep.
as is or better. And as far as an odor control on the pump station, there will be installed. That's part of the specs.
yeah, right, the engineer had already responded that they were state-of-the-art filtration systems to be used. And so, yeah, and I can speak as somebody who lives near a pump house, right? So honestly, and I'm not just saying it, we've lived there 20 years, and unless there's actually a sewer issue somewhere, you might catch a little bit of odor, but so doesn't everybody else in the neighborhood. I mean, it's a bigger project than just a bigger issue than just the pump house. So I think some people fear it a little bit, knowing what what goes through there. But the reality is it's just a filtration system. So I speak from experience. So
And it won't, won't look like anything like that's by your resident.
no, of course
Like I
not.
said, it's going to be like the cabinet by the bed and breakfast, that stainless steel cabinet. That's all
Okay.
that's going to be there.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, very very small. Yeah, nothing like what's near my house. So yeah, good.
Okay.
So I think where we are with that is we need the attorneys, the town councils drawing up paperwork, Marlene? Is that where we stand
Yes.
with that right now? For the easements themselves with the folks? Okay. Go ahead, Phil, sorry.
Phil?
All set with that?
Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
unless you had
And,
something, Ed.
No, I'm good, I'm good. That's,
The next
you,
thing is
Phil.
the COA renovations. I think they're about 95% complete downstairs there. I saw them working there today, putting in the last mini split in that hallway where it was cold because just that electric heater on the floor wasn't cutting it. So they're putting in a new mini split there. I think the project, for everything that I've seen, is going to be between $60,000 and $70,000 under budget.
Good job.
Wow, great.
Yeah.
I
So-
do have one question that I was just thinking about when I came in the building today, Phil, and that was previously we cut back on janitorial services for this building because we had the renovation. I mean, the building's not fully open yet, but where are we going to be at down the road? Are we going to have to go back to more time for janitorial services, just as far as a budgetary type of thing?
Question.
I would say yes, we're probably going to have to put in some more hours on the janitor side.
Okay. And that'll be accounted for in your budget for the coming fiscal year?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that's correct.
Okay. Anything else?
Okay, so the other thing that came to rise over the last couple of weeks is that we had a third-party inspection at the highway garage with the fuel system, with the fuel tanks. It's come up in the past, but we skated by. And this time they're recommending that we replace the underground tanks. Again, it was a third-party inspection. Like 2 or 3 years ago, they said that it's a 10-year plan, but things are failing there. We don't have a good connection between the highway garage and the tanks for as far as alarms or anything like that. And you would have to take the tanks out within a 10-year period from 4 years ago or 3 years ago, so 7 years from now. So we're looking to put that back on the capital plan. We've got a price about $95,000 to $100,000 to take them tanks out and replace them with 2,000 gallon above ground tanks with a containment area underneath them. So that's going on the capital plan as well.
For what year?
What's that?
For what year are you putting it on the capital plan?
It's coming this year. It's coming on this year's plan.
Even though you said that we're 3 years into a 10-year recommended replacement time?
That was your first recommendation 3 years ago, that, within 10 years, you have to remove the tanks.
Yep.
I don't think we're saying the same thing. It's, Phil, you're going to add it to the capital plan that everyone's going to be looking at over the next few months. But what year is it you're looking to actually have the work completed? Is that
It's
also?
going to be for 2022. This year, this capital plan.
I guess
Next
I'm not
fiscal year.
understanding, so is there something that you said it was a 10-year, we're 3 years into it, and all of a sudden it's got to be done this year. Is there, what am I missing? Why-
Yes, now there's bigger problems. That's what I said. The third party came in for the inspection a couple weeks ago and identified
That's different than,
numerous problems within that
DEP,
system.
whatever.
Okay,
When we had the third party inspection a few years ago, it was that within 10 years, you're gonna have to remove the tanks anyways, but we skated by. But now, with this inspection, they're saying that those tanks should be removed and the above ground tanks put in.
yeah, who is the third party, and do they have, what authority do they have over these tanks?
Yeah, we have Advanced Tank. That's who did a third party
And
inspection.
but it's a recommendation.
Yes.
Okay. Are we in danger of these tanks leaking at all? Or is it the
No.
communication?
Good.
So it's not a leaking issue, it's the communication. So like you're talking about like the Vita root system or whatever that's in the garage?
Yeah, the Vita root system, and what you have to do is report that,
Right,
so the reports aren't accurate. And if there is a failure there, we're probably not gonna be, it won't come up on that system.
a failure meaning a leak.
If there was a penetration of the tank.
Okay. So you can't just upgrade the computer system, you have to upgrade the tanks?
Well, you can, but that's about 50,000 to dig the new line from the tank to the building, replace all the Vita root system, everything like that. It's about 50,000. So the tank project's probably 95. So you might as well do it all, because within 6 or 7 years, you're gonna have to take them out anyway.
So the 90,000 does the tank and the Vita root system?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, this was a bit of a roller coaster ride of a DPW report, wasn't it? You brought us up, you brought us down.
Yeah, let's end on a
Phil.
high note, man.
Well, isn't that how it's supposed to work?
Yeah.
Positive, negative, and end with positive, right? So the positive is, the last thing is, the wastewater master plan is complete. The books are available, and Dave Prickett from DPC would like to come in and do a presentation once
Okay.
the restrictions are lifted for a public meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I always like having him come in and explain some of this stuff
Yeah.
so that townspeople can hear it,
It's,
so.
it's a very, it's a couple books that are probably 3 inches thick each, so I think that if he comes in and does a summary, it'll be better than
Yeah,
trying to
we
read
want the
through all that
condensed
data.
version.
Yeah, and I would agree that having him here in person would probably be a little bit better than doing it online, so we'll put that on the back burner until we can do that.
And is there anything that the board has?
No, I mean, I just want to say, Phil, I like these updates, and I personally think we should have these like once a month. Maybe not on these larger projects, there won't be a lot of movement, but I think it's important for townspeople. The DPW is the second largest department behind the school department, and I think people really like to know
Status.
what's going on in the DPW, and a lot of, if I get calls from residents, they're very often DPW related in some way, shape, or form. So, even explaining about the project that went on, the status of the addition up at the DPW garage, those types of things are things that people would like to know about. We've been kind of lucky with winter storms this year, but I think even just general updates about what you guys are working on, maybe what's of concern, what's going well. I think it's really important that townspeople get regular updates on this. So I would encourage you to do this once a month.
That's fun.
That's I don't know how Brian or Ed feel, but I think that, the most important thing is communication with residents. And so if we can let them know what's going on in a department, particular one as large as yours, I think it's just a good thing.
I would agree.
So, I mean, tonight's updates were all sort of the bigger items, the bigger ticket items.
Right.
But I think, to be honest, as a member of this board and as a resident, and I know a lot of other residents, would really like to hear just the regular, ongoing, seasonal, what you're up to sort of stuff.
Okay. We're waiting for it to snow, and hopefully it won't, but.
Well, you just ruined that, Phil.
Yeah.
It's going to start snowing now.
Well, wait a minute now. The chairman did say there hasn't been a lot of storms, so that was kind of the kickoff.
You're right. If somebody jinxed it, it was probably me. You're right about that. Well, appreciate it, and the storms that we have had, you guys have done a good job as usual.
As always.
Yep, so we appreciate that. Great, so I think that we should, coordinate that with Marlena once a month thing. It doesn't even have to be this long, Phil. This one was particularly long, but you did have bigger stuff, so, 10 minutes or so at once a month, I think would be good.
Yep.
Yep. So I'm all set with Phil. Are you guys all set with Phil?
I'm all set. Yep,
Thank
thank
you very
you.
much,
Thanks
Phil.
for the update.
Thank you.
So Marlene, finally, we make it to Marlene.
Right. Just a very quick financial update. And I had reported previously that the treasurer and accountant are reconciled through November. Treasurer's bank statements will have probably at this point come in for December, so they'll be reconciling December. The audit, FY20 audit, was completed. The financial statements are finalized, and I forward those to the board today. And I expect that we'll probably want to schedule the auditor, Tony Roselli, reach out to him regarding his availability based on the board's next two scheduled meetings. And he said he could be available and would be glad to attend remotely. So I will even ask the finance committee if they are interested in joining.
That'd be great. Yeah, the financial team should be put
So
together.
I think, the board will be pleased to see that, FY20 financials, there are some improvements. Certainly looking better than they have in previous years.
Madam Chair? I think well, other than everything lining up and being in good shape, I think what caught my attention the most, and we got these late this afternoon, so I don't know if my colleagues have had a chance, and I was working, so I was trying to distract myself from my real job and then look over here. But many of the comments in those Tony Roselli letters were nothing to report at this time, or no deficiencies found. It was like, yes. So thank you to Sharon and the accounting department and whoever's on the call with us, and you, of course, Marlene. So a lot of the comments were really were positive. And of course, Tony's been with us through thick or thin. So I think for sure when the auditor can see that there's been such a turnaround, you could sort of read that in his comments in the various documents. So I just wanted to say that was nice to see.
I received those later. I didn't even realize I received them because it was a little late. So I haven't had a chance to look at them yet, but I look forward to it.
And there were some items referenced, and
well, there always are, and
and we had our financial review with the financial staff, and those have been addressed, and either some of those were already in the process of being corrected, or have.
Right.
And so we reported that back,
which is
Tony
also often
Roselli.
the case with these
Right.
audits that come out. So.
Well, the audit's through June, right?
through
It's-
June
So it's
30th,
through
that's
June,
right.
last June.
After-
So,
yeah.
here we
Yeah.
are 6 months later,
Yeah.
7 months
Yeah,
later.
halfway into
So a
the
lot
next
of
year.
things have already been in the works, to your point, or have already changed
Correct.
beyond
That's
the
right.
closure of that
That's
particular.
right. They were already in
they were the-
progress,
right, so.
those changes.
Yep.
And, to be able to say, though, here we are, it's January, that FY '21 is reconciled
Yep.
through November is huge.
That's really
Yes, it
big,
is.
yeah. That's really great.
So,
Yep.
Well, thank you to everybody who
Absolutely, the
played
financial
a
teams.
role in getting us to that point.
Doing great.
Took a long time, but we got there.
Yeah.
Amen, brother.
yeah. So CARES funding update, I had expected myself to be reporting back, or reporting to the board expenditures. So we have the ability to still spend that money that was allocated to the town through December of this year. So we know that the COVID coordinator and Scott Pomeroy are working. And so I haven't pulled that all together yet, the numbers, but I will have that for the next meeting. So that is considered an eligible expense,
right.
reimbursable expense. And Diana, to your comment or suggestion, recommendation at the last meeting, I haven't, but I will be reaching out to Senator Comerford because there is some confusion about, the percentage
Right.
that the town is receiving. When it appeared that and the fire chief and I know that there may be some costs that a percentage could be covered by the FEMA funds, and then may qualify for the CARES funding. But anything that was eligible per the CARES Act, that was 100% reimbursable.
Right. Sorry. I think it's important too, and I'm going to reiterate this because I said it at the last meeting when we had this conversation, was we basically followed the directive from the feds and the state
Right.
as to what qualifies to be reimbursed. And that's, we didn't go off track with that. Because
We
you
stuck
have
to it.
Marlene, you have Chief Flaherty, you have Chief DeKosha. I mean, everybody understood that you just can't go crazy and start buying things that you might need but wouldn't be covered. So when you proposed, or you told us what was not covered, at the time anyway, that's why we're doing some more checking, it was a little disappointing that we followed the guidelines and basically a good amount of the monies weren't qualified. What we were told didn't qualify. And of course, they tell you that after the fact, after you already spent it. And we wouldn't have spent it
Yeah.
if it wasn't on the original list of things you could buy. So I guess I'm just saying that so that.
Right, they're not covering 100% of
Right,
that
the
cost.
townspeople understand that we were following all the guidelines we were given at the time.
And
There
do
we
we
go.
have a handle on, I know we had some previous discussions about expenses at the school department, and whether or not they were CARES Act qualifying. And then I know there was some talk about cameras that were purchased that weren't being used. Has all of that been,
There was
taken
some
care of?
equipment that the school had returned, some items, some
Okay.
tents, and I believe there was some Chromebooks. Maybe it was Chromebooks
Yeah.
that were returned. They weren't
what about,
going to use
weren't there
those.
cameras for in-classroom teaching that weren't being used?
There were
that's
some. We bought 40
possible.
of them.
I may have,
We bought 40 of them.
One for each classroom.
right, because there was a question, they had been purchased and
I mean, but that's not how
ordered anyway, but
teachers
they
are
weren't all
teaching.
being used.
Yeah.
Right.
So I will
I don't know
check
if any
on
were
that.
returned or if
We
the
should check on that.
or if the
because-
expectation is that the teachers will need them once they're back in the classroom.
Right.
So we'd have to get with the superintendent.
Yeah,
on
I
that.
mean, I think that that's a worthwhile question to
Yeah.
ask, because that
They
was.
weren't the most expensive item, but if we're not using them, we're not using them, so we should get our money back.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I will
Because I
check on
think
that.
we
Larry
need
just
to.
popped back up. Maybe he knows
It's
the
very
answer.
clear that we're going to continue to have CARES, or COVID expenses.
Right.
And so I think we need to, make sure that all of what we're spending is really being used so that we're maximizing the benefit of
Right.
this money. Because, I mean, like you're even mentioning Carrie and Scott. I mean, these are going to be ongoing expenses. I mean,
Yeah,
contact tracing is not
Yeah.
slowing down at this point,
No.
as we know, so.
that's
okay.
right.
Bob, I saw you pop on, did you have a update or anything regarding the CARES funding or the cameras we were talking about, or?
So last way that it was left was the superintendent was supposed to be looking and doing essentially an inventory and an audit of the cameras that were being used. And whatever wasn't, he was supposed to get in touch with us and say that we don't need them and we could send them back as long as the company was willing to take them. The other items had already been returned, some tablets, some covers,
Okay.
and the tents.
Tents, yep.
So we did get some money back, but the cameras are still kind of outliers. And I don't know if that's going to change effective as of today. The governor had mandated that it was supposed to be live teaching, even if in a fully remote setting. I honestly, I don't know where our district is on that, but that was something that the governor came out with about 6 weeks ago. So it could be changing. They might be putting them into play if they hadn't been for the last couple of weeks. So.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know that.
So, thank you. Just so I'm clear, so that edict that came from the governor means the teacher would be in their classroom teaching, but the students would still be remote?
Or they
some
would
of
just be
them?
live. I think what it means is live teaching, regardless of whether the teachers are in the classroom or at home. But in other words, interacting with the students for the school day, all day, as opposed to just assigning things or sending the students videos to watch that aren't live. Like live instruction is what he's mandating, from what I understand.
It was also a second part of his guidance is that the teacher should be in their classrooms,
Okay.
teaching from their classrooms to, in our case, the priority students who are in the building, and teaching live to those that are fully remote, but that they would be in their schools across the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
So that was handed down about 6 weeks ago, and Hatfield is not doing that yet,
To the best of my knowledge,
To-
no.
to my
Well,
personal knowledge.
Which
or
is
not.
why we bought those
Right.
cameras 4 months ago.
Which is why my question came up.
Well,
Good question.
I think that's a great edict,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully our district is going to start doing it, because that's all I'll say.
Same.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, so Marlene, the MassWorks, we touched on a little bit.
So MassWorks infrastructure grant, Phil had mentioned that. The quarterly report that was due early January has been submitted. So I reported out the activity between October, this is that quarter, the last quarter, October through December, and what has been expended. And I received confirmation that the report was received, and my most recent submittal for reimbursement is being reviewed right now, currently.
And so you submit that information, not the DPW director?
All the reporting is done through my office, the requests for reimbursement.
For
yeah, that's
MassWorks.
all. Yeah,
Okay.
for MassWorks grant. All the paperwork reporting is done through
Okay.
the town administrator's office.
Okay. Oh, my goodness, town hall renovations is still on the agenda.
So, yeah, we have a change order.
Yep, I see that
And this
here.
is for work downstairs relative to the Council on Aging. So, in my mind, this additional cost for that work that has to be done, it's an an alteration for the railing on the west side egress, and also some work for the ceiling tiles there where the sprinkler work was done. So this amounts to $3,456. And I'm recommending that it be charged to the money that was for the renovations for the town Council on Aging Center.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, of
Absolutely.
course.
Yep.
And Ed, did you want to speak to Ed's
Well, as
the
far as the
go-to
railing,
guy?
that was something we had agreed to a while back, so.
We did.
We had sort of said that railing work needed to be done, and then when we renovated the COA, they had to come in and readjust the sprinkler heads.
Right.
And the only thing I'd like to add is, as you know, there was not a lot of steam upstairs, and there was a plugged condensate return pipe. But it's not one of those issues where it can just fix it. What had to happen was the architect had to come and confirm it. Then the architect had to make a drawing to give
To
the
the
mechanical
engineer.
engineer instructions.
Yeah,
So-
and so on and
So
so
the
on.
architect has issued to the mechanical engineer the
Then the
instructions.
engineer had to come
um,
out.
So it's all
Good
documented,
grief.
so.
Yeah.
so
Good grief.
that's-
So we're lucky it's only $3,400 and not,
But that's,
yeah,
that's
a lot of
separate.
expensive people involved in that process.
Right.
Okay.
It's always a process.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with this. I don't have any questions. We need to vote it?
Yes, please.
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve the change order in the amount of $3,456.15.
Could you
I'll
just
second
reference
that.
that as change order 7, please?
I'm sorry?
Change order
Uh,
7.
7?
Amend my motion to say that I will approve change order number 7. Is that
Oh,
right?
yeah, it is number
Or change order 7.
007.
Yes, 007.
Change order 007.
Okay, I'll second it.
Okay. Ed's sick of it now.
A motion's made and second. Any further discussion?
No.
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Marlene, do I just squeeze my signature somewhere here?
In the signature, yes, right above your name there, it says see attached digital.
Okay,
but
so
we're
I just
not
sign
doing it.
above C
Yes,
attached digital?
Yes, please.
And I don't sign on that back page?
Oh, wait a minute.
Phil?
You have something to say or add, Phil?
Yes, I just have a question, I guess, and maybe Ed can confirm. When the fire pump had problems,
And the fire pump had problems.
what was the cause? Was it because of the contractor? Remember a couple weeks ago or last month when the fire pump kept running, the alarms were going off?
Right, right. And the architect and the contractor were notified,
No, it's just chair.
and
So,
they came back, the SRI, the vendor came back and did some work.
okay, that's what I want to know because the electric bill went from $60 to $500 for that month,
What?
for that fire pump.
Well, that wasn't because of the candles in the windows during the holidays.
No, because that's a separate line in there and that's all it's identified for is the fire pump. And the bill went from $60 to $500. And it was that because of the contractor's problem, I guess is the question.
Yeah, we need to look into that.
I think we need to see
well-
the next month's bill.
We'll ask the question.
That's how you're going to know.
Yeah,
We'll ask the question.
we'll ask Phil.
Okay, I was just
Can you,
thought that I would bring that up.
Can you provide me with copies of that bill? And then, when is the next bill due?
Well, I just paid that last month, so probably a couple weeks it'll come in.
Okay, so. it'll be
But you
good
can
to-
see, you can see the spike on the bill where it was level, like $60 right across until that month when it went up to the 500.
Yeah, that's. a
Well,
huge
that's pretty
spike.
significant.
Yeah.
They give you the graph of how
Right.
much
Right,
electricity.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, because we haven't heard anything about that, so I haven't anyways.
No, this is,
No.
yeah,
There
so,
hasn't been
yeah,
a report sent to us or any information at all.
yeah,
We'll have to, we'll get your information and we'll forward it and we'll find out what's going on.
yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
That's
that's all I
a-
had.
That's
Thank
a
you.
good question, Phil. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for bringing that up. Oh, my God, that's.
Okay.
Um,
So capital planning and budget.
And those just stay on
Yeah,
there
okay.
continuously. Again, just a reminder, budgets are due January 29th. Capital Planning Committee continues to review plans. They meet tomorrow night and again on February 1st.
We hope to wrap it up on February 1st.
So that's everything that I have.
Excellent, thank you. Do you have anything?
I'm good.
I'm good as well.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. Any further discussion?
Nope.
No, ma'am.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you,
you,
John.
Thanks, John.